And welcome to Holistic Circle podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philip Kobault. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And today from wonderful California, George Hayaker. Hello, George.
Hey, Philip. Nice to see you. Hello, everyone.
Great. We, of course, had the classic technical excitement of podcasting, but we worked it out. We were both flexible, so we're starting on a good foot. Thank you so much for your patience. I always like to start the podcast, I guess, like everyone else, with asking my guests for a small introduction for the people who might be new or have never heard you, although you just told me 30 podcasts already. So it's always nice and easy to talk to a senior podcaster, so it's going to flow quick and great. But please, nevertheless, give a small introduction so my audience knows what you do, what's your background, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm a resident of Napa, California, 64 years of age. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I've started and built numerous different types of small to medium-sized businesses. I've moved all over the United States and the world. I had a challenge with addiction to pain pills and alcohol. I coped with mental discomfort for much of my adult life until I hit a bottom in my early 50s. Required me to go to rehab and reinvent myself. In that process, I did a lot of self-discovery and self-reflection and learning about what had happened to me growing up and during this cycle of addiction. And during that learning process, I discovered that all these patterns that I had developed were patterns in my brain. And so I began the process of learning about the brain, doing a lot of studying and research and reading about neuroscience. And that led me to where I am today, which is after my own transformational process, completely rewiring my brain and reinventing who I am today from who I was before. I now hope other people do the same. And so I'm a neuroscience educator and coach, and I help people understand their brains, develop a new relationship with their brains, understand how the brain functions, how change occurs in the brain, and investigate what might be causing them issues or problems in their own life, and figure out through a partnership how to transform them into a new and better way of being.
Well, that's of course one of the hot topics, so to say, neuroscience. It's one of the boom things right now happening. And if it's okay with you, let's a little bit dive into the deep end before we go backwards, forwards. Usually we're starting with the personal background, building up to the transformation. I think in this case, I would love to start at the end, so to say. Could you just give us a little bit of a scientific lecture, neuroscience? Is it an accepted science, like among the academics? Is there a lot of research? Is it coming from the academic world? Is it coming more from the spiritual world? So is it data-driven or is it experience-driven? Can you a little bit just explain to people who've never heard about neuroscience and don't know what to do with the name? Can you a little bit help them out here?
Yeah, so neuroscience is the study of the brain and nervous system. So I actually refer to it more as brain science than neuroscience. I think the word neuro freaks people out. So really, it's just an understanding of how your brain operates like any other organ in the body. It is the engine of our entire world. It drives all of our bodily systems. Nothing else would work without the brain. And so it's really just understanding, how the brain functions and how our mental life emerges from the brain, why we experience the mental outcomes and the mental experiences that we do. How did those come to be? So that's really, and it's all data driven. This is all based on research, proven science. So nobody's guessing here. And so to me, it's really the most reliable type of approach that one could take to changing their mental way to be, because it is all based on the brain and how actual mental life is formed. And so if we are living in a moment where we're not happy with what's happening in our minds, neuroscience allows us to understand how it got to be that way in the first place, how it was formed. And we also then understand how to change it into something different if what we're experiencing is unhelpful and we want it to be different.
So this neuroscience, the program that you make, this is like a course program, universal study. Is this done by psychiatrists, psychologists, and then other therapists? Who is the people who are mainly using these techniques? Where can mainly find that?
Yeah, well, I'm using these techniques. It's different than therapy. So therapy is a lot about understanding how you got to be a certain way, uncovering that. I also can help do that, but I focus more on where we want to go now. So a lot of people go to therapy, they find out what's wrong with them, but there's stuckness that occurs in terms of where they go from that point forward. Because it's great to understand what's bothering us, but at the end of the day, we all want to move on to something else. And that's what neuroscience, education, and coaching helps do, is train people themselves to understand how the brain works so that they can help shift themselves into an entirely different version of themselves. And that's through remapping the brain's neural pathways. And I could go into that a little more deeply if you'd like me to.
Absolutely. If that's okay with you, if you would like to talk about it. But I'm happy to start on some scientific conversation before we can see real world application and your experiences and so forth. I think it's such a new field that people need a bit more background to start to ease in.
Yeah. That we are, who we are as people, our personalities, are formed and mapped in the brain. So we have 85 billion neurons in our brain, which are brain cells. And they all move around and form patterns in our brains to reflect the people that we are today. Throughout our entire lives, we've had all kinds of experiences, emotional experiences, thought experiences, behavioral experiences. Just think about everything you've ever experienced in your life. Your brain's neurons, those 85 billion neurons, have formed patterns. They connected to one another in patterns to reflect specifically all those experiences. Okay. So everybody's brain looks different. Everybody's brain has 85 billion neurons that are patterned differently. They look like Rand McNally maps of Europe or the United States, where you see all these roads going every which way. Everybody's brain has a different map. And the key to this is that the brain has the ability for those neurons to change and move around and repattern and reshape themselves. As a matter of fact, everyone's brain looks a little different every single day than it did the day before because we've had new experiences from the previous day. And the brains have shifted and moved around a little bit. The neurons are more than happy to move around a lot, or as much as we would like them to, but we have to show them the way that we would like them to change. And really what it is that we have to start changing who we are in terms of how we think, feel, and act. And then the brain will start changing inside as a pattern to reflect the changes that we're making in our lives. And so I don't think people understand that very well, that the brain is merely a computer storage system of everything that we've ever experienced, and it's formatted and organized itself in a way to reflect the decisions that we make. And so if we start making new decisions and decide we want to be somebody different, if we start acting like that new person, like this person that we envision that we wish we were and not the one that we are, or new thoughts that we'd like to have, or new emotions that we'd like to have, if we start doing those things and repeat them often enough, then the neurons of the brain will actually begin to shift, change patterns to reflect that different person. And so it's very much like learning a new skill. If you think about like learning a new language or learning a new sport or learning a new job or anything, you knew nothing about at the beginning, but you just started learning and practicing to be good at those things. Developing a new mental life for yourself was very much the same way. It's like building a new skill or a new language. And so the more that we practice that, the brain will begin to respond and reflect this new thing that we're learning.
Do I say something completely stupid when it's a little bit like fake it until you make it?
Yeah, it's exactly that way. And it feels weird and strange at the beginning because it's new and different. And the reason it feels weird is because the brain, number one job is to keep us safe and keep us surviving so that we can have babies and procreate and have the species evolve and continue on. And so to do that, it likes everything to be familiar and predictable. Because if things are not predictable or different, it doesn't know if it can keep you safe and surviving in a new and different way. And so it likes comfort. It creates comfort around the fact that it knows who you are already. And so even if you're not experiencing good things in life the way that you'd like to, or a good mental way or a good mental state, your brain says that's okay because it knows that it's familiar with it. And it prefers familiar and predictable over new and different. So that's why people find it hard to change, is because your brain is resistant until it knows that what you want to become is also going to be safe. And so that's why you have to fake it till you make it, because you have to simply go off your cognitive knowledge. This way I want to be, this thing I want to become is going to be better for me. So you have to force it for a while until your brain begins to experience it. And the brain then becomes comfortable with it because it starts to become familiar with it. And that way of being is now predictable. So it says, okay, I'm not going to resist as much. And once the brain starts to detect that this new way of being is more rewarding, because we all know the brain loves reward. It loves things that are pleasurable. It gives us feel-good neurotransmitters when things feel good. And then we're motivated to do more of them because they feel good. And those are transmitters like dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, and those things give us feel-good sensations, and therefore the brain becomes motivated to do more of that. So this fake it till you make an idea is true so that the brain can become familiar and feel safe with this new way of being, but also once it finds out that it's actually more rewarding than how you are now, then it will actually become excited and motivated to do more of that new thing because it now feels more motivated by it than it does your existing way of being.
I'm sure it's very interesting, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but a lot of teaching theories for kids center around the fact that they have to feel safe to accept new information and new learning. So safety is one of the key factors to kids learn new stuff, which that's how curiosity can drive. So it's so funny that you're saying that because it's so similar to a lot of teaching theories.
Well, yeah, because we all, as humans, children or adults, have 6 core psychological needs. And stability is one of those 6 core psychological needs. Inherent in stability is safety. And so whether we're a kid or an adult, those needs always exist. They may shift a little bit as we get older. We may want more stability when we're young, and then we may migrate away from that because we're willing to take more risks and seek more things like significance and skillfulness early in our adult life. And then as we get older, we may migrate back to, well, I'd like more stability again. I'm more risk averse. So, there's these 6 core needs that we may evolve and shift around between those needs, but we always have all 6. And like I said, the brain's number one job is to keep us safe and surviving. So it's always hardwired to develop behaviors, emotions, and thoughts that are going to help satisfy that need.
I also found your explanation very compelling and interesting because when you teach meditation, which I do, you've experienced 100 times that people sit and after some time they feel uncomfortable, it's itchy, or they think they feel some pain. but you know that this is more or less just an imagine of the brain resisting to learn some new skill. And when people get more familiar with it, it just keeps sitting and more or less ignoring the sensation, and all of a sudden it disappears and it's just gone. So it's exactly as you described this so very well. And I think especially with meditation, you can see how the brain is trying to motivate you not to learn something new until it realizes it's actually very nice to learn that new thing. And so this is very nicely explained.
And so what's happening in the new skill that you're developing, meditating, you're actually the neuron that your brain, or some amount of them, are moving around and shifting and developing a pattern around this idea of meditation. And it has the actual physical process of meditation, the actions of doing it, but then there's also the thinking processes, or in the case of meditation, the idea that you're going to try to quiet the mind. And then you have the emotional components of calmness and relaxation and tranquility and so on. So those all get wrapped up together, different neurons to different parts of the brain that represent the thinking component, the emotional component, the behavioral component. They all kind of string together and attach through their dendrites, which look like little octopus tentacles, and they all connect and exchange chemical messengers, and they're communicating with each other. You have to do that activity, meditating, more and more, so the brain learns through repetition. And the more that it does it, the bigger the stronger and more brain this pattern gets, the more emotionally pleasing it is, the more transmission of neurochemical there is through there. And down the road, as you become more expert at meditation or any other thing you're learning, this pattern becomes like a root of a tree, and it starts to get more deep and more thick and more grainy based on how valuable it is to you, how emotionally significant it is to you, the reward that it's presenting to you, how big a part of you, how often you repeat it. Like if you're a meditator once a day or multiple times a day, like this root, this neurological pathway that represents this new way of being for yourself, becomes very ingrained and entrenched and developed. Each time that we practice it, we are like watering and fertilizing this new root. And that's what makes, because every time we engage in it, those neurons and the electrical transmission fires up in it and actually becomes live. And it just keeps getting stronger and more ingrained, especially when it's emotionally pleasing or emotionally significant, and when it's reward.
The point I was trying to make with what's always made me smile, that to see how strong the brain is trying to resist, especially with meditation, it's crazy what the brain delivers you. It makes you feel pain in the knee. It makes you feel itching in the nose. It is so determined to make you stop meditating. But after a while, you just get used to it because you sit every day, as you said, and now it's the itching of the nose. Now it's this and now it's that. But you've been through it a couple of times. Some moment you kind of smile to your own brain. It says, bring on your worst. I'm going to sit there anyway. And once the brain has really understood, you're just not giving up, you determined little bastard, it just stops. But it comes up with new ideas. It comes up with making you feel you're tired, or it is such a clever machine up there just to stop you from learning. And that it's always fascinated me so very much, how determined is the brain to test your will to learn something new. So it's really fascinating that you have mastered, so to say, this quality to beat the brain in its own game.
Yeah. I love the words that you're using there. What's really important here is to establish a relationship with your brain. Because I think a lot of us, I know in my case, when I was stuck in my addiction and when I was living life detached from who I really wanted to be, I just thought that the mind was what it was, and I had no say-so in its direction or what it was bringing to me. I just thought I had no idea. And and I wasn't a partner with it. I had no relationship with it. I was just subjected to whatever came. And I just kept reenacting in the same unhelpful patterns over and over again. And those only got worse and stronger. And I was just stuck until I hit the wall, and I had to look at another option. And I had to dig deeper, and I had to say, whatever I've been doing is not working. I have to try something else. And that's when the sky opened and the new possibilities existed that maybe there's a different way. And then I suddenly learned, my brain could just as easily change into something else as it had developing into the person that I had become. All I needed to do was to start living like a different person, and the brain would follow. What it is about understanding how your brain works and how it delivers that experience, your states, how it delivers who you are today. And then also just an understanding that it can change and how it can change. And then you saying, okay, now I'm better equipped to understand what I'm trying to do here. And I can begin to design this new person that I want to be. And that's a really critical component, is understanding at the neurological level who you want to be and making sure that all the components of this new identity that you want to build for yourself are tethered together to your values, to your belief systems, making sure they're satisfying those psychological needs, making sure that you're thinking, feeling, and acting like this new person. To really, like, you're just like sitting there as a cartoon drawer, drawing this new version that you'd like to be of yourself. Like, it's just dream state, right? You could be wherever you want to be. And so you just start laying out what this person looks like, how they think, feel, and act, what their identity is. It sounds weird and pie in the sky, but it's absolutely true. And then once you design that person, then you spin out to design your life, your daily, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, how you're going to be, and you start acting out that person. It's like you're an actor. And it feels weird at the beginning because, again, like you said, the brain is resistant to what's different. But after some time, and I'd say 90 days, you are well on the way to being that person. You are far more closer to being that new person than you are for being who you were before. And so this isn't just me making this stuff up. This is real stuff that's happened to me, it can happen to anyone. Everyone's brain is capable of transformational change like this.
But I guess being very determined and very strict with the routine will be a massive factor. Knowing how tricky the brain is, to really have to be all in to make this happen, or am I exaggerating?
The two things you have to bring to being different are motivation and commitment. It's understanding up front that this is going to be weird for a while, potentially even challenging or frustrating, because everything has to be forced with the thinking part of the brain. And what that means neurologically is that when things feel hard, it means that you're having to spend a lot of mental resources on doing that. They're not automatic. They're not natural. That becoming automatic happens after repetition. So it's things like riding a bike, brushing your teeth, things that were now super automatic for us. At one time in our life, they weren't. And they were hard and frustrating. And then we learned how to do that. And then they moved from the front part of our brain, which was where we had to really focus and concentrate, requiring a lot of mental energy and resource. And after a while, we became so skilled at them, and the brain had patterned themselves in such a way that it became easy, and then it shifted into our unconscious. And so that's what we're trying to do here, is just take any other skill that we've ever had to learn that was hard at the beginning. Learning a new language is not easy. Super hard at the beginning, very frustrating. But after a while, once you learn the language, it was easier. And it shifted from the front part of your brain to the back part of the brain. So this is like learning a new language. It's learning how to be a different person that will ultimately deliver better mental outcomes to your life.
So the classic brain muscle memory thing happening here.
Yeah, that's the neurological explanation for muscle memory.
Right. So this is all very interesting, but before we now go with some practical applications, some of your experience as therapist and some of your cases and all the nice and juicy stuff, I'll have to a little bit annoy you and nag you with some question, which I know it's a spiritual podcast and I know my audience and they will be now really itching in the chair and say, what is with past life regression? What is Achaean records? But what is with all of that? How can you change the brain if last life influences and things like that? Is this somewhere around where you say, no, we humans, the brain, that is it? And what I do is not connected to past life, to all of these things? Or do you see even connection on that level?
Yeah, I may disappoint you a little bit. I don't know a lot about the whole past life to current life. I do, even if there were, let's say that there is a connection between past life and current life. And frankly, let's look at our current life. We could look at our earlier life in this current life, our childhood and so on, our previous life. And whether we're bringing neural patterns from a previous life or bringing them from earlier in this life, we have still arrived at this point with a set of experiences that form neural patterns in our brain, can change and shift if we so want them to. And if we follow the right processes where the brain is willing to have those neurons shift and repaddle.
Which is, by the way, a brilliant answer.
Oh, okay. I made it under my way.
This was a jackpot. I think it could have not been answered better in any combination. But let's just one more little question in between the next block. How you see then consciousness? I know there's a lot of right now. It's a very hot topic in the academia, trying to understand where to put consciousness in all of this, and it's changing massively with neuroscience coming in. Where do you put in this work that you do? Is consciousness something that is important to you, or that is on a different level than your neuroscientific work, that repatterning that you do, and consciousness does not play into it? The question of consciousness.
Yeah, you're right. There's a ton of work being done around this right now. Whether consciousness even lies within our own body and brain or whether it lies outside of us. What I will say is the brain, for as amazing as it is, it takes in trillions amounts of information all day, every day. The amount that actually comes into our consciousness is a speck in an ocean. So in other words, our brain, like what we're aware of in our brain is infinitesimal compared to what our brain is actually taking in as far as information. How it decides which information to bring forward and which to leave in our consciousness or our unawareness is still trying to be understood. But you can bet it all evolves around the brain's number one job, which is to scan the environment for threats, keep us safe and surviving, and try to keep our world as predictable as possible. That's really, again, what the brain's number one job is. So I think it's filtering all this information that's out there and really trying to whittle it down into what's most important to keep me alive right now in whatever context or environment that seems to be at the time.
Again, I think it's a very good answer. And I think it's a very clear answer that you draw a very important line, that you stay on your side of the road, so to say, and this is where you can make impact. This is where you can help people and not question too much where all this information is coming from, how this information is coming from. You look at the information that actually has arrived and is actually, that's the information you're working with, and that's what you can transform, and that's what you change, and all other questions to be answered in the future. I think this is a very wise choice to focus on your job and not getting lost in all the missing links, so to say, that the brain has to. If you'd be so kind to just now give our audience a couple of like real world examples. We talked about your own life, but maybe you have some of the clients you've been working with. I also always like to ask, how long, you said 90 days. Is this, are you meeting once a week with your client for 90 days? Or I always like to ask this practical question so people get a picture how it looks like contacting you as a patient. So what are the main kind of requests that you get? And how does it look like making such a therapy program with you, if you want to tell us that?
Yeah. So I just want to, again, be clear. It's not therapy. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm a certified, we're called a neuroconstructions educator or coach. And constructions evolved around how our mental life emerges from our brain. It's constructed. In every moment of every day, there's different ingredients that the brain uses, one of which is sensory information that it's taking in from the world. And there's 4 others that it blends together, decides and predicts what mental experience should come up at that moment. And again, therapy is focused on a lot on, I don't feel good, I'm bothered, I'm experiencing these mental symptoms, and the depression, one more. And it's good at going back in your past and uncovering why that is and trying to help you understand why that is. Okay. But then there's, in my opinion, most people want to feel better, and they can get some relief from that individual exercise, but they want to start figuring out how they could be different in the future, like how life can get even better.
So I understand you're correct. Basically, if I translate this from my ears, is just that people have done the works, people have maybe worked with whoever therapists, did work their paths and understood a little bit their way. And now they say, now it's time to change. I want to be somebody else. So people don't come to you to cry on your shoulder. They come to you and said, I want to be a better husband. I want to be this. I want to be that. Help me make this transformation. Help me map this out. This is precisely where you start with your work. Once people have the wish to be someone else. Is that now better understood for me?
Yeah. And so I will go back in the past, because a lot of times they're stuck where they are and they can't get to be that other person because they have things from their past that are keeping them stuck. They develop this identity around something that happened to them in the past, and thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that help them meet the needs that they have, but in a way that's not helpful anymore. And they develop those ways in the past because that's what worked for them at the time to get by. But now they're in the future and they just haven't resolved these issues, and they are still stuck and being held back by their mental experiences that are pleasant and are helpful. And they want to be different, but they just don't know how. So I can take them back in their past and say, okay, here's why, like a therapist does, here's why you're feeling the way you are, and here's why you responded the way you did at the time and developed these patterns that you now have. But we now agree that they're not helping you anymore. And we work to loosen the grip that those patterns have on the individual so that they're not holding them back anymore. They're not wed to them. They're not tethered to them. They're not stuck to them anymore. And there's methods that we use to do that. And so that's kind of where therapy, where I can take people back to. But then I say very quickly, okay, so now we're not tethered to this way of being anymore as much. We've loosened the grip. Now, what do we want to be that's different? Let's design this new person, how they want to be. And so it's really an ideal thing where we draw up this person, and then we start mapping how we're going to become that person. And then we work together for 90 days to become that person through practice and repetition. And it's not always a smooth path, because the brain, as you said, is tricky. It has these old patterns, and things will happen in life that cause the brain to want to go back to the old patterns because it's what it knows, and it's what's familiar, And that's how it got by for years and years and years. And so then these things may happen, and then we talk about them every week. What happened? And this is why it happened. This is the old pattern pulling you back. But this is not how we agreed that we were going to be. And so we reverse it more. And so little by little, we chip away and move further away from an older version of ourselves into a new identity. And that is what it looks like. So if we're committed and motivated and fastidious about practicing this new version of ourselves, before you know it, not a light switch, but it's gradual, we start to feel better, weight starts to come off our shoulder, we start to lose tangible improvements in our life, our relationships start to get better, we're less anxious, we're less depressed, so on and so forth. Now, I am giving you a very high-level view of what that looks like. And granted, there's a lot of detail in all of that, including a ton of education that the person is presented with so that they can begin to understand it themselves, because it's a lot more useful for someone to understand the concepts and implement it within themselves with me showing them the path than it is for me just to say, hey, do this. Now they have a full understanding of their brain. They're developing a partnership with it. It's a give and take. They start learning from their brain's signals, because these things that our brain, these mental experiences that we have are just signals from the brain telling us that it has a need. And we don't know that's all it's doing is express there. It's like your child crying and saying, I have a need. What do? You go and help the child with their needs. Our brain has needs if we want to listen to the brain communicate the need. Okay? But we don't have enough of a relationship that we feel we're comfortable and we don't see it for what it is.
But that's very clear to me. Can you give just a couple of examples? Who are the regular clients of you? What are their needs of change? Is there something like a regular client? People listening now to the podcast, who is your regular client? What is most common that people would like to change? Is it addiction? Is it relate? What is it a regular?
Yeah, it could be a couple different types of people. Everything from a person that wants to perform even better. In other words, they are super into self-development. They don't have maybe anything they feel is causing them to be stuck, but they want the next level. They want higher levels of success or performance in their life. And they understand the value in understanding how their brain works at a much deeper level so they can self-direct and manage themselves. And when they're partnering with their brain and hearing signals from it, they know exactly what to do. They may have a mental experience that arrives that they don't like. They know immediately how to address it. So they are in control. They've gotten out of the driver's side of their life. They've gotten out of the passenger seat of their life and moved around to the driver's seat, put their hand on their brain, and are now in direct control of everything that happens in their brain. That's one type of person. Another type of person is someone that's stuck mentally. They are anxious. They're uncomfortable. They have mental experiences that are not serving them well. They want to change. They have relationship problems at work in terms of their behavior. They might have self-confidence issues, motivation issues, self-sabotage issues. Things are unhelpful in their life, and they want to change out of it. That's another person I help. Third person I help is somebody that not only has those things, but is coping with addictive substances or behaviors as a result of it. The mental discomfort is significant enough that they've chosen to become addicted to something that makes them feel better. And now they've got two issues. They've got the addiction issue, and they've got the underlying mental discomfort issues that cause them to want to use an addictive substance or behavior in the first place. So we address all of them.
That is a quite big portfolio. I'm sure you're not going to run out of jobs anytime soon.
There's a lot of people that, want and need help, and they're just not sure how to go about it.
It really sounds to me as a line around your office block, people lining up because we all basically need you.
Yep.
Who doesn't need you? You work mainly online, or you work live, or both, or?
Yeah, both. I'm here in the Bay Area, San Francisco, so happen to meet with people in person, but obviously there's a lot of people from around the world. Remote work very well, over Zoom works well. Just establishing the visual contact with someone, being able to exchange the energy between each other. It's that personal relationship that I need to develop with someone, that trust and safety. It's very important. It's very important the person be able to open up and be honest and truthful. And it's important for me to allow them to feel safe, and then I have their best interest at heart. And anything I've either experienced myself or even maybe worse. And so there's no judgment. So that's really the important part of a relationship, is that level of safe, trust and concern that we have for one another.
That's one of the things that I often said. Whatever you've done, I've done twice.
Yeah.
We are all sinners. That's why we're here in the spiritual realm. Try to fix as much as we can in this lifetime.
Exactly. And that's my purpose and meaning, is just to try to become a better version of myself every day. I spend enough time creating a worse version of myself. I'm done with that. It leads us nowhere. And so now I'm just trying to help people find a better path for themselves as well.
Well, this was quite a ride to compress, but very conclusive to the amazing work that you're doing. And just because quick you said one sentence a little bit stuck with me, that this is what I do. Are you a pioneer in this field? Are you developing new theories? Are you planning to maybe teach others in future, or are there like a lot of people like you out there? Or is your program specific, special? Are you planning to teach it? The sentence stuck with me, like there's more to come.
Yeah, there's a lot fewer of us in the world, very few actually, teaching this approach than there are traditional coaching methods, which are more behavior oriented, not getting into the roots of why we are how we are, but more, you're feeling this, try this. I get down in the roots of the tree and graft on new roots and really get down to changing the reasons why we're feeling the way we are, so that we can feel different. So, but neuroscience, there's a lot of neuroscientists in the world. I espouse the teachings and research of Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is a pioneer, one of the pioneers in neuroconstructionist doctrine. Is she was the one that helped design and articulate how mental life comes to be through this constructionist approach. That our mental lives emerge from our brain through a very specific formula. And I work with those teachings. But there's not many of us out there that are coaching this way. So it's fairly new. And, there's not a ton of us in it right now.
I guess, but there are a ton who kind of use the terminology without delivering your depth of work. I'm coming across quite a lot of the terminology, but then when people explain it to me, it don't sound as compelling and as well structured as you just now explained.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, Philip, the only thing that's important here is that it gets integrated within the individual so that they change in a transformational, lasting, and sustainable way. We sit here and talk about it all day, but if at the end of the process, someone doesn't feel different, if the neurons in the brain haven't reshaped and reorganized themselves into a different way of being, then it's all for naught. And so that's what's really important to me, is the integration part of it, to make sure it sticks and takes.
That's basically, I forgot now how the American term goes, but it's not all talk, it's action also, or something. There is what is the sentence? I forgot now.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different ways to say it,
but everybody knows what I mean, even if I said it wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not time, it's action. I don't know. I can't get it. I can't put it together. And I so much agree with you, because all about this spiritual or self-improvement stuff, it is easy to philosophize. It's easy to read books. It's easy to talk all about it, talk and talk and talk. But then manifesting it and making it stick, so it actually makes a meaningful and long-lasting transition, that's basically the holy grail, that not as many people as claim to have done it or doing it for actually do it for real. And so in that sense, it looks very compelling what you do. And I guess that's why it works so well. Thank you, George, so very much for giving us this compressed but very strong statement. And I hope that many people will listen to this podcast and reach out to you. Of course, all the links, all the information is down there from the YouTube video. Of course, there is. And I hope many people will leave comments, share with us the conversation. We're doing this for you people. So just tippity-tippy, something, little bit, anything, a smiley, whatnot, because it's all fun and games, but it's done for your entertainment. Thank you very much, George. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Phil. Great to be here.